Organizational units. An organizational unit, or an OU as it's better known, is simply a container in which you can place objects in your domain. Permissions and group policies can then be assigned to the OU, and the objects inside will inherit those attributes that have been configured in the policy. And that's really what OUs are for, organizing the objects in your domain so you can apply policies to secure and manage them. So how should you go about designing your OU structure? Well, the first thing you need to consider when designing an OU structure is how the best administrative management can be attained. Technically, you can throw OUs together using any method you like, and even nest OUs inside of other OUs as you see fit, and that's going to work. But a bit of forethought goes a long way, and ensuring that you create your OU structure right the first time will definitely make administration and management of your Active Directory infrastructure much, much easier. So it's not something you should simply slap together and hope that it all works out for the best. Now, Microsoft have identified 5 different methods you should consider when designing your OU structure. Firstly, we have location, where we'll build our OU structure based on the physical locations of our company offices. We could structure by function, such as engineering and design. Organization, where we'll structure our OUs based on the departments that our company has, for example, sales and marketing and management and so forth. Then we have hybrid structures, such as basing our structure on location first, and then further breaking it up by organization, such as having New York and Sydney OUs, which are location-based, and then having child OUs within our locations for organizational departments, such as sales and marketing. And finally, we have the reverse of that, where we could structure our OUs based on organisation first, like sales and marketing, and then have child OUs for our various locations, like New York and Sydney. So all of these are different ways of structuring OUs, and they're really based around ease of management and ease of applying group policies to your OUs. So depending on the size of your company, you might find that one of these hybrid models works best for you. For example, if you have many different sales departments spread over a lot of offices all around the globe, then structuring your OUs based on location, then organisation, is probably going to work great for you. But if you have lots of offices but only one sales department, then reversing that and going with the organisational based structure might be the better option. So let's see how each of these different OU structures will look. The first method is to base your OU design on location. Now, in a location-based OU design, your OUs are named according to the geographic location in which they serve. So in this example, we have an OU called Melbourne, and underneath this OU, we have 2 child OUs of users and computers. So in these child OUs, we can place all users and computers that are located in Melbourne. Now, if we were to have a Sydney OU as well, we could logically separate the users and computers in Sydney from those that we have in Melbourne. So the logical-based OU structure does have some significant advantages. Firstly, it's easy to find out where objects are located. For example, if a user account is inside the Melbourne OU, you're immediately able to identify that this user works in Melbourne. Now, if your company decides to branch out into new territory, it's a basic task to add another OU to represent the new location. Now, also, as locations rarely change, this model is quite likely to be more resistant to change, since internal resources and departments can often change quite frequently as companies grow and restructure and change direction, but the locations themselves generally don't change very often. So here you're likely to have a model that doesn't require a lot of movement and redesign. Now, in an organisational model, OUs are designed around the company structure. In this model, you'd expect to create OUs for the marketing department, the sales department, the accounting department, and so on. Each department would likely have its own administrator and they'd manage their own resources. So the organisational model has its own advantages. Using this model, it allows for acquisitions of new companies and expansion of the existing company because it's likely that any acquisition or merger would result in both companies or the new company having similar departments or business units. It also allows each department to manage their own portion of the network independently, and it's relatively easy to understand the OU structure. The disadvantage of the organisational OU design is that departments and business units can change more frequently than the locations can, and as such redesign may be something that you need to contend with. Now the next OU design consideration is that of a functional design, and the functional design is based on business functions in your company, things like designers, engineering, transportation, and so forth. Now generally OUs based on function are more immune to change than those based on organisation, but the disadvantage is there's a greater probability that you'll need to create more child OUs to be able to effectively delegate administrative authority over things like users, computers, printers, and so on. Now a fourth type of OU structure is a hybrid of location and organisation, and in this model the parent OUs are based on location like we saw earlier, but the child OUs are then broken down into organisational responsibilities. So here we have a Melbourne location OU, and inside we can see that it contains the child OUs of marketing and sales. Now this type of hybrid OU provides more distinct security boundaries as it separates objects not only geographically but also by department. So the marketing department in Melbourne could easily be managed separately from the marketing department that might exist in Adelaide. Now the disadvantage of this model is that it can require more administrators to manage, or at least better cooperation amongst your administrators, because if you have an administrator in Melbourne who looks after marketing, he or she may have a different way of doing things than another administrator in Melbourne that looks after the sales department, and this conflict can cause problems. In addition, this design will likely have redesign issues if there's a major shift in staff responsibilities or the company goes through a reorganisation. Alright, well, our final type of OU design is also another hybrid model, and this is where organisation comes first and the location comes second. Now the biggest advantage of this model is that it allows for strong security and conformity between the organisational departments while still allowing for administrative control at the various locations. So here we could have strict security policies in place for all members of the sales department, and no matter where the salespeople reside, they could all be managed as a single entity. But it also allows us to delegate authority to the Adelaide administrators to manage the sales resources in Adelaide, whilst allowing the Melbourne administrators some flexibility to manage their own resources. But like our organisational model, this model here is also vulnerable to organisational change. If our departments change within our company, then our OU structure will need to be adjusted. Now there is another thing you'll need to consider when you design your OU structure, and that's how you're going to manage your servers. A great method of managing server roles is to use a structure like this, where you have a member servers OU and child OUs for each of the server roles that you have in your company. Now, this means that it's really easy to create and apply different group policy objects to each type of server role. And don't forget, when you give thought to how you want your OU structure to be defined, a lot of the thought needs to be based around how you're going to apply group policy objects to the target. You might have situations where the sales group, for example, needs more restrictive policies applied than members of the marketing group does. So people in New York might need more power than people in Sydney do. The DNS servers need a totally different policy than your Exchange servers need, and so forth. So whilst it's possible to dump everything inside the one OU and use tools like WMI filters to apply policies to only certain objects inside an OU, it's definitely not the way to go, and sometime down the track you'll wish that you took the time to plan out your OU structure. So if you're fortunate enough to be starting a new OU structure from scratch, sit down, spend the time to think of a structure that's going to cover all bases and make applying policies much easier, and you're going to thank yourself later on. Alright, well, we've talked a lot about OUs, so let's take a look at how we can create them. Now, I'm sure you already have created OUs in the past, but let's see how it's done anyway. Now, as obvious as it might sound, OUs are objects that you create in Active Directory, so you will of course need to have a domain controller in order to create them. So on my domain controller here, we'll go and click on Start, and we'll go to Administrative Tools, and we're going to launch Active Directory Users and Computers. Now when we expand our domain on the left here, underneath we have a bunch of default containers that we can use to manage objects in our domain. Now these are default containers and not something that we really want to use when we're building our own OU structure. Now even though it's not apparent from this console, we have two different policies that are applying to this domain. We have the default domain policy, which is set at the domain level up here at winstructorlab.com, and this will contain things like password policies that will filter down through all of these child containers, so no matter where you decide to place an object in this structure, it's going to be forced to inherit that default domain policy. Now there's also another default policy which is set at the domain controller's OU. Now you might have noticed that only the domain controller's OU has this different looking folder icon. This folder here is technically an OU, as OUs can have group policy objects linked to them. These other folders here are technically containers and not OUs, although at a glance they really look like OUs, but each of these folders can't have policies directly assigned to them. So the problem with leaving these defaults and simply dropping in your users into, say, this users container is that you certainly aren't benefiting from the best form of management and structure, and secondly, not being able to apply policies directly will likely mean that your structure is also less secure. So let's go and create our own OU, and it's as easy as right-clicking at the location you want to create the new OU, and let's do that at the root here of our domain, winstructorlab.com. So we'll right-click and we'll choose New Organizational Unit. Now we'll need to give this OU a name, so let's go with a hybrid structure here of using location and then organization. So I'm going to call this one New York. And also you might have noticed here that the default is to protect this container from accidental deletion. Now this is a new feature in Windows 2008. Well, actually it's not totally new, but it's new in this window anyway. And this feature, when enabled, means that you simply can't right-click on an OU anymore and just delete it, even if you are running as the administrator. Now this serves to protect the OU from people that might accidentally delete it, as the box suggests. So to delete it, you're going to have to go through some further steps, and that'll really ensure that you meant to delete it and it wasn't some sort of mistake. So leaving this box checked is a good idea. So we'll click on OK, and there's our new New York OU. So let's go and create another one. We're going to right click on our domain again, and we'll choose New Organizational Unit, and let's call this OU Sydney, and then we'll click on OK. Now that we have our location sorted out, and of course you can add in as many as you like, we'll now need to add in our organizational OUs. So let's right click on, say, our New York OU, and again we'll choose to create a new organizational unit, and let's call this one Marketing, and then we'll click on OK, and we'll do it again. We'll select our New York OU, we'll right click and create a new one, and let's call this one Sales, and we'll click on OK again. Now let's go and do the same thing for our Sydney location. So we'll right click on our Sydney OU, we'll choose to create a new OU, we'll call this one Marketing, and then click OK, and we'll right click one more time and we'll create one last one which we'll call Sales, and click on OK again. Alright, now let's go and create a couple more OUs, although this time let's use the command prompt so you can see the difference between the command prompt and the GUI. And rather than typing in each line individually, let's click on Start and we'll fire up Notepad and we'll write a simple batch file instead. So to create OUs from the command prompt, we'll be using the dsadd command. So let's type in dsadd OU, since it's an OU that we want to create. Now, the first OU we'll create, let's call it servers. So we're going to say OU equals servers, and then we'll need to define where this OU will be located in our OU hierarchy. So let's create this servers OU at the root. So we'll need to add in DC equals winstructorlab, and then DC equals com. Now, rather than me typing this all in again, I'm just going to copy and paste this line in a couple of times, since we'll now go ahead and create a new child OU under our servers OU. So at the front, before our servers OU, we're going to add in OU equals DHCP. So this line here is going to create a new OU called DHCP underneath our servers OU. Now to save time, I've just gone ahead and I've added a few new lines here for our DNS servers, our file servers, print servers and web servers, but you might also want to add in others for your Exchange servers, SQL servers, terminal services servers, and so forth. So let's go and save this now. We'll click on File, Save, and I'm just going to save this one here on the root of my C drive. And let's give it a file name. I'm just going to save this one as ou.bat. So now let's click on Start, and we'll open up a command prompt, and we're going to go to the root of our C drive. And if we type in ou.bat and hit enter, we can see that all of our commands were successful. So we'll go back to Active Directory users and computers, and we'll choose to refresh it. In fact, I'll click on the domain and refresh it. And here we can see our servers OU has been created. So if we expand that, inside, there's our child OUs based on server role. So as you've seen, it's pretty easy to create OUs, whether that be using Active Directory users and computers or by using the command prompt. Although I will admit that you probably really don't need to be wasting your time scripting your OU creation, since creating OUs generally isn't something that you'll be doing every day. Now, one other thing I should point out, that the default behavior when creating OUs using the dsadd command is to not protect them from accidental deletion. So if we right click on one of these, let's say the web OU, and then choose to delete it, and we'll say yes, you can see that it's gone. However, if we expand Sydney, and then right click on our sales OU and choose to delete that one, and we'll say yes, you'll see that we're told that we have insufficient privileges to delete it, or it's been protected. Well, in my case, I'm logged on using the administrator account. I certainly do have the rights to delete an OU, but I can't since this one is protected. So if we go and right click on this sales OU and choose properties, you'll note here that we have 3 tabs, now none of which gives us any indication to how we can go about deleting this OU either. So to delete it, we'll need to go up here and click on the View menu and then turn on the Advanced Features. Now if we go and expand our Sydney OU again, and then right click on the Sales OU and choose Properties, this time we have 6 tabs here instead of the 3 we saw a moment ago, and what we're looking for is found on the Object tab, and it's this checkbox down here that's protecting our OU from accidental deletion. So we'll uncheck this box and click on OK, and now if we right click on our Sales OU and then choose to delete it, and we'll say yes, this time it's gone. So whilst this protection mechanism might seem like a bit of a pain, it's definitely something that you should use, as it can save your backside, so I'd encourage you to leave it as it is. Actually, while we're on the subject of accidental deletion, you can also protect user accounts, computer accounts and groups from accidental deletion as well. So if we go to our users container and right click on, say, our administrator account and choose Properties, and then select the Object tab at the top here, you'll notice that we have the same checkbox here, which by default isn't checked. So you could check this, and then this account won't be able to be deleted until this box is then unchecked. And it works the same for groups and computer accounts as well. So for critical accounts like service accounts, it's probably a good idea to come in here and prevent them from being deleted, but you will need to display the advanced features to be able to see this Object tab. In this video, we've talked about OUs, or organizational units, which are simply containers that you can use to manage the objects in your domain and assign group policy objects to them. We've talked about 5 different types of structures that you could use when planning the layout of your OUs, and we talked about the benefits of each structure. Then we saw how we can create OUs from both Active Directory users and computers, or by using the dsadd command from the command prompt, or you can string a bunch of commands together in a batch file like I did, so they all get created at once. And finally, we've talked about preventing OUs from being accidentally deleted, and how you can delete them if you really need to. We hope you've enjoyed this video and would like to thank you for supporting Winstructor.